This is Football at 4.
Football at 4, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. It's brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the sport, wherever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. You know, it's not an ordinary Eagles fans. It's just not an ordinary bunch. For a good reason. I'm not being critical. It is a very interesting group of individuals. Howie Roseman spoke today. So did Nick Sirianni at the Combine in Indianapolis. And out there is the Inside the Birds crew with Adam Caplan and Andrew DeCecco. They are both in Indianapolis, and Adam Caplan is with us today as Roseman and Sirianni got a bunch of questions fired their way. And I know you're taking a look at the Combine this week, so let's bring Adam Caplan in to today's edition of Football at 4, the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can find on all podcasting platforms. And don't forget the YouTube channel. Just search Inside the Birds. They'll have plenty of content this week, I'm sure, with what they see from Indianapolis. Adam, what's going on, man?
Mike, good to talk to you. Yeah, I was at both press conferences, and in fact, they were back-to-back. Roseman was first, then Sirianni was second. And, you know, it's interesting. This is my 23rd Combine. So when I first came here back in 2002, it was at the old RCA Dome, which has been torn down, and you would have one or two coaches or GMs talk, but they would wait till one was done and they would have the next guy talk. But here you could have 5 different head coaches or GMs from different teams talking at the same time. It's kind of tough if you're trying to listen in on a bunch of them, but because of, we're doing the segment, want to definitely hear them. So, and nothing earth-shattering, Mike, to be honest with you. There really is. Now, there were a couple of things that I found fascinating. One of them, the big one to me, and I always look at these things differently than most of the media because I've done this now covered the league for 25 years, but I thought it was very interesting. I forget which reporter asked it to Sirianni about kind of some of the things that went on last season. And Nick, he didn't say exactly which one he'll look at, but he talked about, his core values and how he's got to look at, did he do too much of one or the other? I thought that was interesting. And honestly, Mike, that was something that we thought on Inside the Birds. We thought that fundamentals were really poor to end the season. I don't think that it's not even thinking. We know what it was. The fundamentals were terrible, particularly on defense. So I'm very interested to see, and we'll look at this more in OTAs, what kind of changes does Sirianni make?
Yeah, obviously, I guess one of the questions off that then would be, how much Adam, does the new coaching staff help with that? Getting more veteran coaches in there. Do you take a look at some of those failures last year as maybe not having a veteran coaching staff?
It's interesting. So Sirianni talked about, in passing, about some of the coaching changes, and particularly with Vic Fangio, where they wanted to make sure Vic was able to bring in his own guys, Christian Parker and a couple other coaches that he had relationships with who would work with him. Whereas here's what happened in our reporting last year. In fact, we were the first ones to report it was going to be Desai, most likely as a defense coordinator. Desai, because it was so late, he got the job, Mike, at the end of the Combine. It was just hard for him to bring in coaches. And that was a problem. Like, part of why he struggled, I think, Mike, was he just didn't have his guys. And Vic is going to have some of his guys, not all of them, but you need that. When you're bringing in a scheme, in last year's case, Desai was only his second year as a coordinator, and he was running his version of Fangio's defense, you want to have your own people. And Vic is going to have his own people running his own scheme, obviously. So that was a couple of the interesting takeaways that we got from Nick.
Yeah, well, there was a question that was kind of targeted at, not targeted, but like asked about Vic Fangio being a veteran guy and whether or not that will give him more of a voice, his experience as the coordinator. Does he get more sway when it comes to personnel? And Roseman kind of said, well, he thinks he does, but, do you get the sense that Vic will get the chance? Because obviously with the time frame last year, Desai probably didn't get to really, get a lot of say in who he was looking for, because as we get to free agency, does Vic get a chance to say, hey, I've had this guy, I'm intrigued by him, or this is a guy that wouldn't fit so much?
Well, they know kind of ways thinking. So well before he was hired for a consultant for the playoffs 2 years ago, he was actually in their building. We reported this at the time. He was in there every couple weeks. Because he's from Wilkes-Barre, that area, and he's very friendly with the front office. We We saw him in OTAs of 22. We saw him in training camp. It's crazy how much he was around them. Yeah, he's going to have input. Howie is giving his coordinators input. He'll listen. Doesn't mean he's going to do what they want, but he'll listen. Yeah, of course they're going to have. Of course, Vic will have input because you're going to need to have certain players for their scheme. But the other part now, I caution people to be very careful how you read into things. The Bradberry question came up, and that's something where Vic Fangio will have some input in whether he wants to coach him or not.
Yes. That was going to be my next question to you, Adam. What did you think about the Bradberry question? He said he's under contract. He played slot, and Roseman said he's an outside guy. And then at the end, he said he's under contract. He's good. I mean, he's part of our plans. I mean, does that sound pretty concrete to you?
No. What do you think? I always laugh when people say, now I get your point. I mean, it's fair. But people have to be careful of what you're reading into. Do you think he's really going to say, you know what, no, he had a bad year, and we're going to do all we can to trade him? That's not going to happen. Now, I'm going to go back several years. I'd reported that the Eagles were shopping Kelsey. This is 2016, I think, 2015 and 2016. Actually, I asked Howie the question at the press conference. And he never came out and said that Kelsey would be with the football team. He sort of gave sort of not a great answer. If you actually remember, Jason actually in a speech before the Super Bowl talked about that, about how he knew he was being shopped. So Howie's a smart GM. He's not going to give it out that they'd love to move on from Bradberry or what his role would be if he's still in the football team. You can't do that because you cannot give up leverage, Mike. That's the way it works. You never give an idea. If you're going to cut a player, you never let a team know. You never let anyone know that. Unless it's like imminent where you want to get the word out, hey, yeah, we're going to move him, we're going to announce this, whatever the case may be. But you have to be very careful of believe in what GMs say in public. Sometimes the exact opposite. So I'm covering this business stuff for so long, I particularly in a public viewing like this, they're not going to tell you the truth most of the time. But you can read into it you want. Anyone listening to us could say whatever they want. Or if they listen to press conferences, they could take their own read into it, but I don't. When it comes to Howie, but I did like he did say that he's an outside corner. He's right. Look, here's what happened, Mike. We were there in training camp. They cross-trained Bradberry specifically in the slot in case something happened. Well, Maddox got hurt. Don't forget, here's the other one. Zach McPherson got hurt, tore his Achilles. He was their backup slot. They didn't have anyone. Now, if you remember, they tried Ricks in there. Wasn't real comfortable at it, but he did it. It's because they ran out of players to do it. So, yeah, that Howie's right, and I appreciate him saying that. He didn't have to. That part, he's definitely telling the truth.
He did also admit, Adam, that he needs to do a better job at finding talent in that area, which is obvious because they have failed at drafting and finding. I mean, every trade they have made over the years seems like they've added. Hey, throw us a corner in the deal, Mac McCain and Tay Gowan and down the line. They just haven't been able to find anybody that they have groomed themselves.
It's funny. I remember talking to someone with the Bills, I don't know, like a month ago, and the guy said, man, thank God we acquired Russell Douglas by trade deadline. That's a guy, as you're mentioning, was a total failure here. He just struggled, and then he goes somewhere else and plays well. Now, he struggled here, and he had to go. I did not blame the Eagles for getting rid of him. He just couldn't get the job done here. But you're right, Mike. If you go back 2 decades, very few success stories other than Maddox and a couple others of guys that they drafted. Now, they haven't really addressed it a ton, but overall, really, they have not really spent a lot of high-round picks since Lito Shepherd way, way, way back in the early 2000s. So that's going to change. They're going to address the cornerback position, whether it's in free agency, wire signing, trade, whether it's the draft. They're going to do something. They'll try to do something significant if the scenario works out for them.
Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast is at the Combine. Any takeaways from the Reddick exchanges? Hey, can you give us an update on Reddick? And, he didn't seem to answer what's the best case scenario.
Mike. Yeah, they didn't. That was good. I'm looking at my notes here. Totally non-committal is what I circled. I wouldn't read into it one way or the other than that he's on the football team on the final year of his deal. They know he wants to do deal. They're aware of what, where he's at. See, here's the thing. I don't think they know what Nolan Smith is as a football player yet because he barely played year one, Mike. I mean, it's a guy that they spent a low first-round pick on, but, hey, he was a first-round pick. He's got to play more minutes. Now, I'm going to give you another takeaway, which I'm going to read into this one a little bit,
okay,
Mike. We're not talking about Nolan Smith specifically, although he's certainly one of them. It sure sounds like, and Howie mentioned a couple times that they want to play their younger players, and that was good to hear that. Now, we could go. We're not going to go over their roster today, but you could, folks at home could go through a depth chart or go through the roster and see what young players need to start playing. Mm-hmm. Now, the funny thing is because the injury, Rick's had to play a lot. Joe had to play early in the season. Ringo played. The guys talk about that today. They had to play. Now, are there other players? Ben Van Sumeren, we never talked about him, who, by the way, played great football against the Giants at his only NFL start, was absolutely phenomenal. We were told, and we know our Greg Cosell, who worked for us, told us the same thing. That's one player I wish I would have asked about today. I typically don't ask questions at these, but at the owners' meetings in Orlando, Mike, I'll try to be at Sirianni's table there, and I'll try to ask him because there's some guys on the back end of the roster. Van Sumeren would be one of them because he's got a lot of athleticism. You know how bad they are at the inside linebacker position.
Absolutely, yes. Andrew and I have talked about him and whether or not that's a guy that they would feel comfortable going into camp with. Last year they went into camp, they had to bring Zach Cunningham in, and they signed Miles Jack after they went into camp, right? They went into to the start of camp with basically nothing at that spot. So we'll see if they follow a similar blueprint this time around. Nick Sirianni was asked about, does Jalen Hurts have to be a better leader and a more vocal leader? And he kind of went into this whole thing about, you got to be, there's not one way to do it. And then he kind of talked about AJ. Mm-hmm. Did you make something from him looking at Hurts to give him more in that avenue?
I didn't read. I'm looking at my notes here. I didn't get a lot out of what he said there. I understood what he was talking about. It was he backed up A.J. Brown's leadership about what he said. When A.J.'s coming off the field and kind of what he said in Philly radio last week. It kind of backed up what he said, and it is true, by the way, with A.J. Brown. You and I, Mike, have not really talked about this. I'll say that one thing about A.J. Brown, which I did agree with. We have no idea what he's saying to these players when it comes off the field. So for people saying he's being a diva, you have no idea what he's saying. Mm-hmm. That's why you have to be careful of making assumptions when you have no idea what a player is saying. That's why you got to be very careful when you criticize a player without knowing. I've learned my lesson, deal with players over the years. When I think one thing, sometimes it's the exact opposite. And it's the same with these press conferences. Be careful of what you read into. Now, by the way, DeAndre Swift, like you didn't mention him. I don't want to read too much into this. It didn't sound like, because they know he's a free agent. I'm not saying Sirianni would be happy if he left, but look, he talked about Kenny Gainwell, his guy. We've talked about him for 4 years now. This is Kenny's final year. He's in his fourth year. About how much they love him. He had to crowbar that in there about what his role could be. If Swift doesn't return. Yeah, and then in the extensions, Mike Howie did, kind of acknowledge that he wants these guys around a long time. You certainly could read into that. They're going to probably try to extend his contract. We'll see what happens. And they don't have to do it. They've got him under contract for another year plus fifth-year option plus two tags. We know they'll never let it get there, but it's interesting. They put more Howie than Nick talk about the younger players, and then Nick just kind of talking about his thoughts on the offseason going forward. There wasn't any. He talked longer than Howie. He actually talked over 19 minutes. 19:45. I'm looking at my notes. I don't know why I wrote that down, but I did. But Nick was more. I'll say this about their last press conference, their joint press conference. They were both worn out. If you remember, after they lost to Tampa Bay, it looked like they had been through the ringer, so to speak.
Yeah.
They had much more energy. Howie had really good energy, way better energy this time than the last time, and Nick also was kind of lively.
Adam, you mentioned the running backs. Howie was asked about his thoughts on the running back market. I don't know that he gave anything there, but you're at the Combine. Would it be more likely that they just draft a guy and go with Gainwell and the guy they draft?
Well, then you can't go into a training camp without 4 running backs. So they got the kid Lou Nichols. They got Ty Davis Price. I know they're really excited about. They give a pretty good guarantee. for a 1-year deal. And they'll add at least one more, if not two more backs. See, here's the thing, Mike, about the free agent group. Just about every free agent other than Swift had a down year. Something happened, whether the guy was injured, whether the team was bad. Like Josh Jacobs had a year, but not the year that he had 2 years ago. Well, they fired his play caller and the head coach. Josh McDaniels mid-season, Mike. Barkley had a down year, and my report for Pro Football Network got a personnel guy telling me there was no way he would tag him. The tape showed you can tag him. You could come back. The guy said he'd bring him back at half of salary last year. So you're talking about $5 or $6 million for 1 year, maybe some upside to it. These guys are taking, Mike, these free agent running backs are taking a hit. It could even be worse this year.
Oh, Adam, I mean, we could talk an hour about this whole situation because you've got some high-profile guys that I can't imagine they're going to be getting a lot of knocks on their door for multi-year deals. I mean, who's going to give – I don't know, like, you got Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, you've got Derrick Henry. I mean, I don't know who's going to give those guys big-time contracts that they're looking for. I find that to be probably the biggest non-Eagles story for me of the all. I know the quarterbacks and the trade stuff, but what's going to happen at that running back position is fascinating to me.
Derrick Henry is 30 years old. Titans first told me he definitely lost a step. To me, Mike, Derrick Henry, other than Baltimore, who I thought if he was going to get traded at trade deadline, and believe me, Tennessee wanted to move him, I don't know where he goes other than the Ravens, where he'd be a good fit. I have no idea. At 30 years old, by the way, he's a volume running back. He needs a lot of carries to do well. He's not going to do well in 10 carries. So it's a total buyer's market in free agency. A lot of them have injury histories. There's a reason why guys come to market, Mike, at that position. It's too early to know what they're going to do. I know they'd like to. My understanding is they'd like to Swift back, but I couldn't tell you what they pay him. I mean, by the way, Miles Sanders, how about Dave Canales, actually, it might have been Dan Morgan, the head coach. I can't remember. It was either Dave Canales, the new head coach of the Panthers, or Dan Morgan, their new GM, saying that Chuba Hubbard's are starting and Miles Sanders is also there. How about that? Miles Sanders making $625 this year.
Yeah, well,
$6,250,000.
I'll ask you because of all the high profile running backs, does that make it more likely that Swift gets lost in the sauce and just comes back?
Here's the thing, though, Mike. In our reporting, we were told they did not make a hard offer to Miles Sanders. They never really made an official offer. They knew he was going to make a lot, and if Miles was willing to come back cheap, they would have been willing to look at it. He wasn't. Now, what did DeAndre Swift? We don't know we don't know A, what he wants, and B, because of his injury history. Now, this is the first year he didn't actually miss any games due to injury. He missed the last game because they're resting starters. Now, this is good for him. He didn't catch the ball like he should have. He had nothing to do with his bad coaching, bad scheme, bad play calling. Bottom line is, Mike, Swift for the first time in his career showed he could handle a decent amount of volume. So theoretically, he should do well, but it's a depressed market.
Yeah,
he's one of the youngest guys on the market, and he's from here. He went to St. Joe's Prep, but he's not. No one's getting more than $6 million a year. Plus, I mean, they might. One of these two backs might get $6 million. But to get more than that, they're going to have to get incentives. This is the way the market is going right now.
I got that. Yeah, the market's going to be interesting, running backs there. By the way, Falcons released veteran tight end Jonnu Smith. Another tight end has hit the market at free agent. We've talked in the past about possibly the Eagles looking for a second tight end there. So some veteran players, you're going to start to see those names. You're going to start to see rookie names. And we are closing in on the start of NFL free agencies. Adam and I will talk more NFL, some Eagles stuff throughout the time. Football at 4 has got plenty to drop the new podcast. Check that out on all podcasting platforms as Andrew and Adam are at the Combine in Indianapolis. And we'll have plenty more this week on Football at 4 with the guys. Adam, thanks so much, man.
Thank you.